Hello, this is Judy, and for the next hour, I will be reading from the February 9th, 2026 issue of the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. I will do my best to pronounce all names and words correctly, yet please forgive me if I do not. And here is our first article today. It's under provincial politics, and the title is Ontario to examine 45 police departments in response to Toronto corruption probe. Inspector General Ryan Teschner said his office will hire an, quote, outside individual with knowledge of policing. And this article is written by Maura Welsh of the Queen's Park Bureau. Ontario Inspector General of Police announced a sweeping inspection into all 45 police departments after Toronto Police Service officers were snarled in an organized crime corruption probe. Ryan Teschner, the lawyer who leads the Inspectorate of Policing, made the announcement Monday after a letter from Toronto Police Chief Myron Demkiw, and Police Board Chair Shelley Carroll. Ontario Inspectors General of Policing is launching a province-wide inspection into 45 police departments in response to the corruption probe that saw Toronto officers facing a slew of criminal charges. Ryan Teschner, a lawyer who was the executive director and chief of staff on the Toronto Police Service Board, said his office will hire an outside individual with knowledge of policing to bring expertise, singular focus, and rigorous methodology that this important work requires. Teschner did not say who the individual might be, nor did he say when his inspection would be finished. While the criminal probe has identified 7 current Toronto officers and 1 retired officer, all facing serious charges and allegations of connections to organized crime in the towing industry. Teschner said his inspection will examine 5 specific areas for improvement: supervisor control of officers, screening and vetting in the hiring process and on an ongoing basis, access to databases, management of evidence and property seized during investigations, and support for officers with substance abuse and fitness for duty. Once complete, Teschner said his office will decide whether to make recommendations to the Police Services Board across the province. And Maura Welsh is a Toronto-based reporter covering Ontario politics for The Star. The next article is under Olympics and Paralympics. It's day 3 of the 2026 Winter Olympics. Here are how many medals Canada has won so far. Canada's athletes are hoping to best the country's record for most medals won in a Winter Olympics, 29, which was set in Beijing in 2018. And there's a picture of a Canadian, and it's Canada's Valerie Matthias celebrates with her bronze medal in the women's 3,000 meter speed skating competition during the 2026 Milano Cortina Winter Olympics in Milan, Saturday, February 7th, 2026. And this article was taken by Nathan Dennett of the Canadian Press. And people writing this article was written by Joshua Smith, who is a staff reporter, Alexa McKee, staff reporter, Diana Yokob, and that's YAQOOB, staff reporter, and Alicia Wang, staff reporter. Canada adds to its medal count on day 3 of the 2026 Winter Olympics with another bronze medal. Canadian athletes are set to compete in 2 more medal events Monday: men's normal hill ski jumping and women's 1,000 meter speed skating. Canadian athletes participated in 5 medal events on Sunday, including mixed team figure skating, where Canada finished 5th behind the United States, Japan, Italy, and Georgia. Canada's first medal at Milan Cortina came courtesy of speed skater Valerie Matthias, who claimed bronze for the women's speed skating 3,000 meter event on Saturday. The 35-year-old made her Olympic debut in Vancouver in 2010. In 2022, Matthias won a gold medal in the women's team pursuit speed skating competition. Canadian athletes have until February 22nd, when the Games wrap up, to add to their medal total in 116 medal events across 16 disciplines. Canada is coming off a record-breaking performance in Paris in 2024 when the country's athletes won 27 medals, the highest Canadian total ever in a single non-boycotted Summer Games. The Canadians claimed 26 medals at the last Winter Olympic Games in Beijing in 2022, but only 4 of those medals were gold and over half were bronze. The most medals ever won by Canada in the Winter Olympics, excluding boycotted games, came in the 2018 Games in Daejeon, South Korea, when Canadian athletes won 29 medals, including 11 gold. Canada's record for the most gold medals in a single Winter Olympics is 14, achieved on home soil at Vancouver 2010. Here are Canadians medalists in the 2026 Games so far: gold 0, silver 0, bronze 2. Matthias earned Canada's first medal of these Games and the third Olympic medal of her career Saturday. She finished with a time of 3 minutes 56.93, man, that's fast, behind gold medal winner Francesca Lollobrigida of Italy and silver medalist Reg Wiklund, Wiklund, of Norway. The 35-year-old from L'Abbaye, Quebec, entered the Games ranked 4th in the world. She's competing in her 5th Olympics. Matthias is the only Canadian and 3rd international to win Olympic medals in both short track and long track speed skating. In addition to her gold medal in the long track team pursuit at Beijing 2022, she claimed silver in the short track 30,000 meter women's relay at Skoye in 2014. Megan Oldham, who is the women's free ski slopestyle, on Monday morning, Oldham brought home Canada's 2nd Olympic medal and 2nd bronze of these Games with a best score of 76.46. This is her 2nd Olympics and 1st Olympic medal, having previously come in 4th at Beijing 2022. The 24-year-old Newmarket native is a 4-time world champion and entered these Olympics with a bronze from the 2025 freestyle ski and snowboarding world championships. She is set to compete in the women's free ski big air event, qualifiers for which began later this week. And Joshua Smith is a staff reporter with the Toronto Star. You can reach him at his email, which is joshua@thestar.ca. Alexa McKee is a staff reporter with the Star. She can be reached at her email, which is amackie@thestar.ca. Danya Yacoub, DANIYAHYAQOOB, is a staff reporter with the Toronto Star. She can be reached at her email, which is DYAQOOB@torstar.ca. Alicia Wang is a staff reporter with the Toronto Star. She can be reached at aliciawang@thestar.ca. This next article is under the Canada section of the Star, and the title is "Don't Let Donald Trump Distract You. The Rest of the World is Finally Making Real Progress on Climate Change." If you read Climate News, 2025 was a bad year, but the headlines of denial and neglect risk drowning out a different, encouraging story. And the next sentence is, U.S. President Donald Trump has called climate change a hoax, renewable energy a scam, and has seemingly done everything within his power to encourage the production and combustion of planet-warming fossil fuels. And this article is written by Marco Chown, Chown, Ovid, Oved, who is a climate change reporter. Canadians can be forgiven for thinking the fight against climate change has stalled or is even backsliding. After all, U.S. President Donald Trump has called climate change a hoax, renewable energy a scam, and has seemingly done everything within his power to encourage the production and combustion of planet-warming fossil fuels. The first year of the second Trump presidency has put an end to the promising progress on climate change in the United States, with work on offshore wind farms shut down, money-losing coal plants ordered to remain open, and billions of dollars of subsidies for green energy projects frozen. Even in Canada, despite his record of taking the climate seriously, Prime Minister Mark Carney has ended many of his predecessors' climate policies. The cancellation of the consumer carbon tax made polluting cheaper, while the lengthy pause of the electric vehicle rebate made EVs more expensive. There is no more federal government money for green home renovations, but there are billions of dollars for new pipelines and liquid natural gas, LNG, export projects. Decades of fossil fuel production are being locked in, while renewable energy construction has sputtered. If you read the news with an eye for the climate, 2025 was a bad year. But all this denial and neglect risks drowning out a very different story, one of marked progress in efforts to deal with climate change virtually everywhere else in the world. Key indicators show the increasing deployment of renewable energy and clean technology that presage a peak to global emissions. While it may be hard for some to believe, last year was actually a good year on the climate front, experts say. And we'd be able to see it if only we look past our immediate surroundings. North America is uniquely decelerating in a world where everything else is accelerating, said Dawn, D-A-A-N, Walter, principal at the UK-based energy think tank Ember. If you would look at the world and hold your hand over the United States, you would see the acceleration very clearly. And there's a picture with many solar panels, and the caption reads, "A Chinese worker works on a solar panel project." China consumes more electricity than any other nation, but it is also the world's biggest producer of solar energy. And that photo is taken by Kevin Freyer, and it's a Getty image. Renewable energy and clean tech is taking off. Despite the fact that global emissions continue to tick up, 2025 was a record year for many of the things that are needed to bend that curve down. Wind and solar power are on a worldwide tear. While the final numbers aren't in yet, in all likelihood, more renewable energy was brought online last year than ever before. Thanks to a dramatic drop in the cost of solar panels and batteries, countries on every continent are installing record amounts of renewables, which overtook coal to become the top source of electricity worldwide in 2025. A record number of EVs were also sold last year, the total jumping 20% over 2024. They now account for 1 out of every 4 cars sold worldwide, a level Bloomberg calls unthinkable just a few years ago. Again, inexpensive Chinese technology is supercharging the trend, driving sales up in developing nations such as Vietnam and Ethiopia, as well as big economics such as Brazil, Mexico, and India. The only 2 countries in the world where EV sales didn't rise, Canada and the United States. There's a sense we're operating in a bubble in North America. We don't see what's happening in other countries, said Chris Severson Baker, Executive Director of the Pembina, P-E-M-B-I-N-A Institute, a Calgary-based clean energy think tank. There's definitely reason to be hopeful when you look at broad trends around the world. China goes from climate villain to climate hero. Trends in renewable energy and clean technology are important, but emissions are what really count, and there's progress being made there as well. While it's not official, China, the world's biggest emitter of greenhouse gases, has likely hit peak emissions and is set to send them dropping. Again, this is largely thanks to the incredible amount of wind and solar generation being built. China has installed more renewables than the rest of the world combined, 3 years running. In the past 12 months, China installed so much renewable power that it has stopped the rise in its use of coal and burned less than it did the previous year for the first time in more than 50 years, outside of the recessionary year of 2015. With all that clean electricity, China has been electrifying road transport at an astonishing rate. More than half of all car sales in the country were EVs or plug-in hybrids, accounting for an incredible 12.7 million vehicles in 2025. That's more than half of all EV sales worldwide, or more than the 3/4 of all vehicles sold in the US, gas and electric combined. The 1-2 punch of generating tons of clean electricity, then putting it to work displacing things that used to run on fossil fuels is a technique that knocks out emissions, said Walter, and it's already being copied outside of Canada. Canada is leading and other countries are following, he said. Look at India, coal generation also fell and solar is dominating. We're seeing the start of that in Indonesia as well. Climate action is now market-driven, not policy-driven. This wave of reduction emissions is fundamentally different from the reductions of the past 2 decades in Europe and North America. It's not being driven by climate policy, but by economic and geopolitical forces, Walter said. In other words, renewables and EVs are taking over not because the world has woken up to the threat of a warming planet, but because such options are cheaper and are allowing governments to wean themselves off oil imports. People's bank accounts benefit, countries' economies become more resilient, and the planet warms a little less rapidly, all while the world blows past estimates of what was thought possible when it comes to both clean energy and EVs. It's a welcome change from the blowing past emissions reductions targets, as Canada has done for decades, and reframes the way we can think about climate solutions. We overestimate how impactful policy can be, and we underestimate how fast markets and innovation can move, Walter said. Canada has regularly missed emission reduction targets. And there's a graph of emissions, and Canada is at the top of it. And the caption underneath it says, greenhouse gas emissions measured in megatons of carbon dioxide equivalent. Canadian greenhouse gas emissions for 2024 are an estimate. Canada's targets were Kyoto, KYOTO, 6% below 1990 levels by 2012. Copenhagen, 17% below 2005 levels by 2020. Paris, 30% below 2005 levels by 2030. Glasgow, 40 to 45% 2005 levels by 2013. And this source for this graph is the Environment and Climate Change Canada Climate Institute, and it's a Toronto Star graphic. Solar power keeps exceeding expectations. Amount of new solar power brought online each year has been IEP predictions for decades. And once again, this is another graph, and it just shows how solar power is going up and up and up, way above anticipated levels. And it's a Toronto Star graphic. And sorry, it's difficult to describe. And this, the information though, is from the sources the International Energy Agency, EMBER, Hoekstra, Hoekstra. The green energy and clean tech revolution takes different forms in different countries, but a sampling of headlines shows that previously unimaginable things are happening all over the world. First, Australia will give away free electricity for 3 hours a day this year because of the huge amount of solar that floods energy onto the grid in the middle of the day, now that 1/3 of houses nationwide have panels on their roofs. A similar phenomena is happening in Pakistan, but with opposite results. So many people have installed rooftop solar over the past 2 years, the demand for electricity from the grid has actually fallen, putting electricity utilities in dire financial straits. Nearly 90% of India's EVs have 2 or 3 wheels. Electric motorcycles and rickshaws are flooding into the world's most populous country with smaller batteries than electric cars and a lower environmental impact. In the UK, where the Industrial Revolution kick-started the use of fossil fuels, carbon emissions fell to their lowest level since 1812. This doesn't mean the market is a panacea, said Will Atkinson, an energy researcher with RMI, a global clean energy think tank. Early uptake needs to be supported by policy incentives to speed up adoption, he said. That's because people are more sensitive to upfront costs, which tend to be higher with clean technologies such as EVs and heat pumps, and they don't take into account how much cheaper these things are to operate in the long run. Ultimately, policy should just make the dang thing cheaper, because once people have the economic incentive, mass adoption ensues, and this pushes out dirty technologies faster, he said. According to RMI's research, solar power and EVs are already there, while heat pumps and batteries are on the cusp of taking off globally. Where does that leave Canada? Canada is stuck on an island with the only country in the world that doesn't want to electrify, said Rachel Doran, the executive director of Clean Energy Canada, a climate think tank based at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver. Canada has been trying to find a balance. The federal government articulates it as a conventional and clean energy superpower. But I think the stats are showing globally that electricity is winning because of its efficiency and affordability, she said. Sacrificing everything to follow the U.S. is not even a choice we have anymore, and probably not one that will position us for success in 10 or 15 years, when the world has gone that much further ahead in these new technologies and these new supply chains. Doran said Canada should plug into these global supply chains and keep its eyes on where the rest of the world is going if we want to reap those benefits domestically. An example of this is what Carney did last month when he signed a deal with China to reduce tariffs on EVs while capping their number to ensure they won't flood into Canada and destroy the domestic auto industry. This hasn't stopped automobile advocates from claiming the deal is a bad one and that local industry needs to be protected from Chinese competition, a tactic admission that they cannot produce an EV that even competes on price. Beyond the threat to local manufacturing, Canada faces several unique challenges to joining the world in electrifying. As a massive, cold, sparsely populated country, it is more difficult to build an EV charging network and to provide enough renewable energy to heat homes through winter. This narrative is something that Phil McKay, Senior Director at the Canadian Renewable Energy Association, pushes back on, saying there's nothing holding us back from doubling or tripling the amount of wind and solar we currently have. The prairies get so much sun, they're on par with equatorial countries, he said. Equatorial countries, he said. It's so clear and the sky is cloud-free for much of the year. And in Windsor, we're hitting similar latitudes to Barcelona. It's not well understood, but solar is a huge opportunity for Canada, he said. While Alberta's 2023 moratorium on new wind and solar stopped much of the country's renewable momentum in its tracks, McKay said there's now a healthy number of announced projects set to come online in the coming years, reducing our dependence on fossil fuels. It's sometimes frustrating to hear the argument that when you get up in the Arctic, there's no sun during the winter. Yeah, but there's 23 hours of daylight during the summer, so that's a lot of energy that could displace diesel. Still, Canada will not be able to achieve the same amount of solar as Australia or Spain, and it's not because of the climate, said Andrew Leach, an energy and environmental economist at the University of Alberta. Historically cheap natural gas does more to erode the economic incentive to switch to clean power. For a long time, we have had this great comparative advantage here and have cheap energy from fossil fuels. But now the cheapest source of energy in the world, solar, is something that actually doesn't work that well here, he said. This should worry us, not only because it slows down the domestic climate transition, but because it will inevitably lead to a competitive disadvantage as other countries install massive amounts of cheaper power for AI and data centers. Cheap solar will eat our lunch, he said. Focused as we are on the disruption to our economy wrought by the mercurial decision-making of the U.S. president, Canadians have largely missed out on the incredible climate action accelerating around the world. If we worked a little less on maintaining our existing industries that extract, transport, and combust fossil fuels, and a little more on harvesting energy from the sun and wind, experts say we might avoid finding ourselves left behind, along with a neighbor that wants to turn back time and return to the way things were. Marco Chound Ovid is a Toronto-based climate change reporter for The Star. You can reach him via email moved@thestar.ca. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our next article is under provincial politics, and the title is A Cabinet Minister Had Nowhere to Nurse at Queen's Park. Ontario's first female speaker decided a change was in order. Speaker Donna Skelly helped to set up a quiet space to be set aside for feedings, diaper changes, or just some alone time with MPPs, infants, or toddlers. Speaker, and there's a picture of the speaker, and it's Speaker Donna Skelly, a mom and grandmother, has opened the legislature's first family room. She said she realized she had to do something when she saw a cabinet minister running around asking for a place to nurse, asking for a place to change her baby. And this picture is taken by R.J. Johnston of the Toronto Star. And this article is written by Kristen Rushkowy, Rushhowy, who is a senior writer. The Queen Park's baby boom needed a family room. With a growing number of MPPs becoming parents within the last year or so, at least 7 at last count, most of them cabinet members, a quiet space has been set aside for them in the legislative building for diaper changes, feedings, or just some alone time with their infants or toddlers. It was after Speaker Donna Skelly saw a cabinet minister running around asking for a place to nurse, asking for a place to change her baby, that she realized something needed to be done. I thought, that is so unacceptable, so I decided then and there that we had to have a room, a friendly room, said Skelly, the first female speaker in Ontario's history. The space is a reflection of a younger demographic, in particular women, seeking elected office, and it is seen as a way to encourage more to do so, especially at a time when those efforts appear to have stalled. A year ago, 46 female MPPs were elected in Ontario, about 37% of all MPPs, down slightly from the 47 in 2022 and the history-making 49 in 2018. Federally, women and gender-diverse MPs comprise about 30.3% of all members elected in 2025, down slightly from the 13.5 in 2021, according to the group Equal Voice. For Andrea Kaanjin, Kaanjin, Minister of Red Tape Reduction and the MPP for Barrie Innisfil, Innisfil, mother to two young children, it's not just a reflection of who is being elected, but also recognition that parents need support. It's welcome news to me because it makes a big difference when we have a place that's very inviting, especially for a breastfeeding mom, that you can go for some privacy, that is just down the hall from the changer. Natalia Kustova Bashta, and that's Kustendova-Bashta, Minister of Long-Term Care and mother to now 1-year-old son, appreciated that parents have a space that we can just use. We don't have to ask any permission. We don't have to book it ahead of time. We can just show up and ask security to open. Or we even get a copy of the key so we can use that without having to plan ahead or thinking about it. It's a load off my shoulders. Like most working parents, MPPs with young kids can struggle to juggle the demands on their time, but for them that includes long and sometimes unpredictable job hours, commutes to and from Queen's Park in downtown Toronto, as well as numerous community events in their ridings to attend. Kustova Bashta, and that's Mississauga Center, said that on top of her work duties, she can spend a total of 3 hours or more stuck in GTA traffic on her commute to and from the legislature when the House is sitting, which can be very tough. In the last legislative session, I had a rule that I would bring him in every Wednesday so that I can at least see him, she said. Otherwise, when I'm working 12 to 14-hour days with my commute, I might not see him all day. At least on Wednesdays, I brought him in and we spent some time together. If she has more children, knowing there is a space, if and when that happens, that will be available is also very helpful and gives me that peace of mind, she added. The family room, which was set up in available office space, has a diaper changing table, a nursing chair, as well as a toddler table and chairs with books or toys. A wall of photos, the Gallery of Giggles, showcases MPPs and their babies who use it. Robin Lennox, a new Democrat MPP, was back on the job a couple of weeks after giving birth late last year. Lennox, a doctor, also takes on the additional hospital shift, but has paused that for now. The establishment of such a room for the past few months, now that there's a female speaker, shows one of the beliefs of having women in positions of power, said Lennox Hamilton Center, whose older children are 5 and 3. The benefits are felt by all working parents, not just working mothers. Quebec is the only other province believed to have a similar space in its assembly. Kajin, and that's Kananjin, who has a 4-year-old son and a 16-month-old daughter, brought her kids to work regularly in their early months and often used others' offices to nurse. Colleagues were supportive of her return, she added, and even took turns holding them in the legislature when she needed to speak. With a real baby boom at Queen's Park, including my own son born last year, these changes make it easier for parents to serve Toronto, added Transportation Minister Pramit Sakarina, and that's PRABMEET whose 3 children have been born over the past 5 years while he's been in office. Skelly, a grandmother to a 3-year-old, said her goal is to make Queen's Park more family-friendly, not only to politicians, but also the public, with more programming and free events in the works. Equal Voice, an organization dedicated to boosting the number of women in office, said, when there's nowhere to safely care for a child or nurse an infant, it quietly limits who can serve. That's why the group is pleased to see a family room at Queen's Park, said Interim Executive Director Lindsay Brumwell in a statement. It sends a clear signal that parents and caregivers belong in the public life too. And that's how we open politics to more women and more diverse leadership. And Kristen Riscovi is a Toronto-based senior writer covering education for The Star. This next article is an opinion article, and the title is Catherine O'Hara based her characters on family members and people she saw riding the bus. And this is written by John Semley, who is a contributor, and John Semley is a freelance writer. My favorite Catherine O'Hara performance, not surprisingly I guessed, is the one she gives in one of my all-time favorite movies. In Christopher Guest's 1996 mockumentary, Waiting for Guffman, O'Hara plays Sheila Albertson. She's one of a company of yokels mounting a local theater production to celebrate the sesquicentennial, that's 150th anniversary, we're told again and again, of their little one-horse Missouri town. It's a movie stacked with all-timer comic performances from Parker Posey, from O'Hara's longtime co-star Eugene Levy, and from Guest himself. But O'Hara has always been the standout. She plays a dopey, highly self-medicated housewife, forced to trod the boards at the local high school at the prodding of her overbearing husband, the late Fred Willard, who is also fantastic. It's a sort of role, alienated, small-town housewife that may seem stock or a little cliche, trusted to anyone else. O'Hara plays it with the measures of hilarity, unconsciously lip-syncing her husband's lines during their joint audition scene, Tragedy and Grace. There is a far-off look in her eyes throughout the movie that suggests a woman lost in her own mind, or what's left of it. And the role typifies so many of O'Hara's funniest performances. She took a character that was a little one note on the page and breathed new dimensions into it. I interviewed O'Hara extensively a few years back for a lengthy oral history on the origins of Second City's 1970s Toronto expansion and cult classic SCTV television shows. There was something she told me in those interviews that always stuck in my mind. She said that where her contemporaries in Second City's Chicago touring company seemed highly literally, eagerly tossing out reference to philosophers or authors or whatever, she and her Toronto compatriots were driven by something purer, not the need to appear intelligent or well-read, but their desire to crack each other and their audience up. She based her characters on family members and people she saw riding the bus. She was interested, she told me, in the beautiful ridiculousness of human beings. This sense of humanity informed so many of her performances. For my money, she was never better than in those Christopher Guest movies, Guffman, Best in Show, A Mighty Wind, and later, For Your Consideration, in which she stars as a so-so actress driven insane by rumors that she may receive an Oscar nomination. In those films and throughout her career, O'Hara was great at playing neurotic characters who were driven slightly mad by even a sliver of spotlight. Lola Heatherton, the desperate actress she played again and again on SCTV, was another classic example of this type. Moira Rose, the former soap star she played on Schitt's Creek, is another. Those characters are ridiculous and vain and a bit ditzy, but they're profoundly human. For all her rejection of the philosophical orientation of other improvisers and comedians of her era, O'Hara seemed to have her own intellectual outlook. She once told another interviewer that to understand her characters, she go to the depths of nothingness. It even ties into an even more basic belief about her own career and approach to her characters. She never struck out to be a comedian. She considered herself to be an actress. Just an actress who played funny, sometimes cracked, usually very weird characters. She went inside the heads of people she was playing or people she saw on the TTC, found a fundamental fissure or nothingness, and brought that back. I don't know a lot about acting, but I know that the focus of some kind of psychological realism is a bit of farce. Most human beings aren't. Human beings aren't psychologically coherent. Read our minds at any given moment, and you're not likely to find clear-cut, legible motivations tied back to some childhood trauma or something. You're liable to find a cacophony or overlapping voices, all talking to each other, crowding up the joint. You're also liable, in a lot of cases, to find nothing at all. O'Hara understood the fine line between faculty and insanity, as well as being a central condition of all human experience. She seemed to understand that all people are fundamentally yearning and broken, but that made them beautiful too. And when I think of Sheila Albertson, I think about her like she's a real person. And that's probably the highest compliment I can pay any character, or for that, any actor. Our next article is from the Breakaway blog, and the title is Maple Leafs Power Rankings. Welcome back, William Nylander. And this is written by Kevin McGran, who is a sports reporter. What a difference William Nylander has made. He's taken his game to the Olympics for Sweden, and he's got all the swagger in the world to back it up. The Maple Leafs flailed without him, but ended the pre-Olympic portion of the season on a high because of him, with a 3-game winning streak. That was part of his latest segment of our power rankings. 1. William Nylander, not ranked. His return from a groin injury made all the difference, the spark the team needed in sweeping 3 games in Western Canada. He had his 17th multi-point game of the season and his 6th game of the season with 3 or more points against Calgary. He has recorded 4 points, 1 goal, 3 assists in his last 2 games, and 16 points, 7 goals, 9 assists in his last 9 games played. Number 2, Max Domi. He has his flaws, but Domi has been on fire offensively. He led the team with 2 goals, 4 assists this segment. He's up to 22 assists. Domi has recorded 8 points, 3 goals, 5 assists in his last 7 games. Verbu plays him less and less in his own zone, but they have other players who can start in the defensive end. Number 3, Auston Matthews. The goals have dried up somewhat, but not the effort. Matthews had assists in 3 consecutive games. He had a goal and 5 assists this segment and led the team with 16 points. Number 4, Jake McCabe. When he's on his game, so are the Leafs. He helped shut down Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, Draisaitl, on Tuesday night. Led the team this segment with 11 block shots and a 24.8 average ice time. Number 5, Bobby McMann. Used his size and speed and scored a couple of empty netters this trip. It feels like he's being showcased on the top line. He's doing well there with 3 goals, 2 assists this segment. High raisers. John Tavares climbs to 6th from 11th, and Matias Maccelli gets to 7th from 12th. Both benefited mightily from Nylander's return. Tavares scored his 20th goal on the power play on a feed from Nylander. It was his 16th time in his career he hit the 20-goal mark, 4th and most active players. Maccelli has scored in the back-to-back games. Goalies on the up and up. Joseph Woll rises to 9th from 13th, and Anthony Stolzarz, Stolarz, jumps to 10th from 20th. Definitely some recency bias here, since both goalies lost their first games of this segment. But Woll won 2 in a row, and Stolzarz stopped McDavid and Draisaitl for his first win since November 5th. If that tandem is back to the form they showed together last year, the Leafs might be able to pull off a post-Olympic surprise. Other risers. Modest gains by the defensemen forced some reliable forwards down. Let's face it, the Leafs are up against it without Morgan Rielly. Simon Benoit moves to 13th from 18th. Troy Stretcher moves to 14th from 17th. Both had big weeks. Stretcher scored, and his minutes are inching back up. Benoit blocked 10 shots and delivered 10 hits. Dropping down, Oliver Ekman-Larsson drops to 11th from 1st. Let's hope the season isn't catching up to the veteran after a -6 week. He was second in average ice time, 22.40 minutes, and could use a break, but won't get one. He's playing for Sweden at the Olympics. Nick Robinson also dropped to number 16th from number 8, but he didn't have a bad week at all. A goal, an assist, and some strong play. But the goalies and defensemen rose to the challenge of the trip, pushing down forwards like Robertson, Scott Lofton, and Nicholas Roy. Nothing wrong with their games, really. Just a few more good things are happening to other players. So the full rankings are 1. William Nylander, 2. Max Domi, 3. Austin Matthews, 4. Jake McCabe, 5. Bobby McMahon, 6. John Tavares, 7. Mateus Michelli, 8. Matthew Knees, 9. Joseph Woll, 10. Anthony Stolwartz, 11. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, 12. Brandon Carlo, 13. Simon Benoit, 14. Troy Stetcher, and 15th Morgan Rielly, 16th Nick Robertson, 17th Scott Lofton, 18th Nicholas Roy, 19th Philippe Myers, 20th Steven Lorenz, 21 Kelly Jarnkrok, Jarnkrok, not raked, Easton Coward, Dennis Hildeby, Jacob Quillen, and injured are Chris Tanev, Tanev, Dakota Josiah, and Henry Thron. And Kevin McGran is a Star Sports reporter based in Toronto. This next article is under Nova Scotia, and it's 5 things to know about Halifax's proposed new transit plan. Halifax, buses are running late, routes are overcrowded, and new vehicles need to be ordered as Halifax Transit looks to implement a $70 million service revamp, its first major attempt at shaking up the system in a decade. And this article is written by Devin Stevens of the Canadian Press. Halifax, buses are running late, routes are overcrowded, and new vehicles need to be ordered as Halifax Transit looks to implement a $70 million service revamp, its first major attempt at shaking up the system in a decade. A report to be delivered to the city's Transportation Standing Committee on Monday includes a new core service plan, which proposes change to 37% of transit routes. The proposal, which will still need a green light from the Regional Council before moving ahead, comes as City Hall and the provincial government struggle to alleviate worsening traffic snarls. TomTom, a navigation technology company, recently ranked Halifax as the 3rd most congested city in Canada, behind only Vancouver and Toronto, but ahead of Montreal. Here's 5 things you need to know about the proposed change. What is the core service plan? The proposal includes more frequent trips and expanded hours on many of the city's busiest bus routes, especially at peak commuting times. It also calls for a new bus line serving the fast-growing West Bedford neighborhood and increased service for the airport bus from the current 22 hours to 24 hours. Halifax Transit said it's a way to get short-term relief ahead of a larger reworking of the system expected in 2028. Why is it needed? The last major transit shakeup was approved in 2016. The city said it had increased ridership significantly until the pandemic scuttled demand in 2020. Ridership returned to pre-pandemic levels in the 2023-24 fiscal year. Originally planned as a 5-year project, the 2016 revamp was only completed last year because of pandemic-related delays. Halifax's population has boomed in the post-pandemic years in the way the 2016 plan did not envision. Statistics Canada estimates the city's population was almost 545,000 people in 2025, an increase of about 15%, more than 70,000 people since 2020. Riders have expressed frustration with overcrowded buses, scheduling issues, and missed trips. The service had an on-time rating of 88% in 2020 when the pandemic kept many people at home. Its performance has steadily dropped since then, hitting a low of just 69% in 2025. That's 16 percentage points below Halifax Transit's target of 85% on-time service. How much will it cost? The city says it will need 30 new buses, a mix of 18-meter diesel articulated vehicles and 12-meter electric buses to make all the proposed changes. The capital cost for vehicles is pegged at $53 million in the next 3 years, with additional operating costs estimated at $22.1 million. Funding the plan would add about $63.73 to the average property bill over the same time span, says the report. How many people take transit? There's now an average of 104,000 weekday boardings across the transit system, a 7,000 trip increase from 2018. The city says the number of overloaded buses has increased threefold over that period. The report notes Halifax Transit's harbor ferries don't get stuck in traffic and ridership is up. Saturday ridership has increased 37% since 2018, with just one of the 2 ferry lines running on weekends, and the numbers are now comparable to weekday ridership. Around 58,000 to 65,000 people take the ferry depending upon the day. What's the long-term plan? Halifax Transit said it's moving away from multi-year transit plans in favor of a strategic roadmap. It says that will allow it to be more flexible and better able to respond to evolving transit needs as new neighborhoods are developed and major transportation infrastructure comes online. The roadmap calls for a new and more expansive reworking of Halifax Transit's service plan in 2028. It will look to integrate regular bus service with 4 proposed bus rapid transit lines designed to sweep people across town with all-day service, fewer stops, increased frequency, transit priority signals, and dedicated bus lanes. The expanded revamp will also look at folding the planned Mill Cove ferry service linking downtown Halifax to Bedford into the larger transit system. This report by the Canadian Press was first published February 9th, 2026. This next article, and our final article today, is under business, and the title is Average Asking Rents in Canada Fall for 16th Straight Month Report. Asking rents in Canada fell 2% year over year in January to an average of $2,057, marking the 6th consecutive month of annual rent decreases. And this article is written by Daniel Johnston of the Canadian Press. Asking rents in Canada fell 2% year over year in January to an average of $2,057, marking the 16th consecutive month of annual rent decreases. A report from Rentals.ca and Urbanation said that rents fell to their lowest level in 31 months in January and were down 6.3% compared with 2 years ago, but were 12.9% higher than levels seen before the COVID pandemic. The report says lower rents and a softer market helped to improve affordability, with the average rent-to-income ratio falling slightly below 30% in January for the first time in 6 years. Sean Hildebrand, president of Urbanation, said in a news release that the improvement in affordability shows that more supply brings down costs. The report says shrinking unit sizes have also contributed to the decrease in average rents over the past 2 years. The average size of rental listings fell to 857 square feet in January from 885 square feet last year. Across provinces, average apartment rents declined the most in BC at 4.7%, 4.3% in Alberta, 3.3% in Ontario, and 2.6% in Quebec. This report by the Canadian Press was first published February 9th, 2026. And you have been listening to a reading of articles and features from the February 9th, 2026 issue of the Toronto Star. Your reader has been Judy, that's me, and I thank you for listening, and I thank you for your time, and take care of yourselves and have an amazing day. Thank you so much.